Girl vanished on school field trip. 3 years later, her jacket shows up at a pawn shop. What happens when a simple pink jacket holds the key to a mystery that destroyed lives? Before we dive into this heart-wrenching story of loss, determination, and the search for truth, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The rain drummed against the classroom windows as Sarah Mitchell arranged the small desks in perfect rows for the third time that morning. 3 years had passed since that devastating day, yet her hands still trembled when preparing for field trips. The memory of Emma Rodriguez's disappearance during what should have been a simple school excursion haunted every moment of her teaching career. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you okay?" asked little Timmy, noticing her pale complexion. Sarah forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Just making sure everything's perfect for today." But nothing had been perfect since that March afternoon when she'd returned from Pine Valley Nature Center with 23 children instead of 24. The official report stated that 9-year-old Emma Rodriguez had simply wandered off and likely fell into the rushing creek. Her body was never found. Case closed. Life moved on. Everyone moved on except Sarah. Across town, Marcus Chen adjusted his reading glasses as he examined a delicate porcelain figurine at Second Chance's pawn shop. At 62, the retired investigator found comfort in the quiet routine of cataloging forgotten treasures. After losing his wife Margaret 2 years ago, this part-time job kept his sharp mind occupied and his detective instincts satisfied, even if he was only dealing with desperate sellers and bargain hunters now. The bell above the door chimed, and Marcus looked up to see a nervous man in his 30s clutching a small pink jacket. Something about the stranger's fidgety behavior immediately caught Marcus's attention. After 30 years of reading people, he could spot anxiety from across a room. "I need to sell this," the man said abruptly, avoiding eye contact. "Kid's jacket. Good condition." Marcus accepted the garment, and his breath caught. The jacket was covered in handmade unicorn patches, each one meticulously sewn with care and love. But it was the embroidered name tag inside that made his blood run cold. Every detail matched the photographs he'd studied obsessively 3 years ago when Emma Rodriguez's case had consumed his final months as an active investigator. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked carefully, his trained voice revealing nothing. The man shifted uncomfortably. "Found it. In my attic. Previous tenant left it behind." Marcus knew a lie when he heard one. His fingers traced the delicate stitching of the unicorn patches, work that spoke of a mother's love, not something casually abandoned. As the stranger hurried away with $40, Marcus reached for his phone with shaking hands. There was only one person who would understand the significance of this discovery, though he dreaded making the call. Sarah Mitchell was about to learn that some mysteries refuse to stay buried, and that sometimes the past reaches out through the most unexpected messenger. A child's pink jacket that should have been lost forever. Sarah's phone buzzed during lunch break, displaying an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Reporters occasionally still called about the Rodriguez case. But something made her answer. "Miss Mitchell? This is Marcus Chen. I was the lead investigator on Emma Rodriguez's disappearance." Sarah's sandwich fell from her hands. I remember you. Why are you calling?" "I need you to sit down," Marcus said gently. "A man just brought Emma's jacket to my pawn shop." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "That's impossible," the police said. The pink jacket with handmade unicorn patches, each patch sewn with different colored thread, purple, silver, gold. The name tag inside reads R in red embroidery. Sarah's vision blurred. She remembered every detail of that jacket because Emma's stepmother Claire had insisted the girl wear it that day. "For the photos," Claire had said. "She looks so pretty in pink." "Miss Mitchell? Are you there?" "I'm here." Her voice was barely audible. "Who brought it?" Marcus consulted his notes. Tony Vasquez, mid-30s, Hispanic, nervous as a cat in a thunderstorm, said he found it in an attic, but his story kept changing. First it was his attic, then his cousin's, then a storage unit he bought. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Emma's bright smile as she'd modeled the jacket that morning. The little girl had been so excited about the nature walk, chattering about seeing real deer and collecting pretty rocks. "What does this mean?" Sarah whispered. "It means Emma didn't just wander off and fall into that creek," Marcus said grimly. "Someone took that jacket off her body, Miss Mitchell, and they've been keeping it all this time." The implication hung heavy between them. If Emma had simply fallen into the rushing water, her jacket would have been swept away with her. But someone had carefully removed it, kept it, and now needed to dispose of it 3 years later. "We need to call the police," Sarah said, her teacher instincts kicking in. "Already did. They're reopening the case, but they need your help. You were with Emma that day. You knew the family. There might be details you remember that didn't seem important before." Sarah's hands trembled as memories flooded back. Claire arriving late to pick up Emma, her strange insistence about the jacket, the way she'd seemed almost relieved when told Emma was missing. "Mr. Chan," Sarah said slowly, "I don't think Emma wandered off at all. I think someone was waiting for her." The silence on the other end confirmed Marcus's suspicions. After 30 years of investigations, he knew the difference between accidental disappearance and calculated abduction. "Then we're going to find out who," Marcus said with quiet determination. "And we're going to bring Emma home." But neither of them realized that by making that promise, they had just signed their own death warrants. Detective James Rodriguez, no relation to Emma despite sharing the surname, met Marcus at the police station the next morning. His weathered face told the story of a man who'd seen too much in his 25 years on the force. "Chan, I'm glad you called," James said, pouring bitter coffee into 2 chipped mugs. "I never felt right about how that case was handled." Marcus studied the detective's expression. "What do you mean?" "Political pressure. The brass wanted it closed fast. Bad publicity for the school district, tourism concerns about Pine Valley. We had inconsistencies in the family statements, but I was told to focus on the accidental drowning theory." "What kind of inconsistencies?" James pulled out a dusty file box. The stepmother, Claire Rodriguez. Her timeline never made sense. She claimed she was at work during the field trip, but her supervisor said she left early that day, exactly during the window when Emma disappeared. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Did you follow up?" "Tried to. Got shut down. Captain said we didn't have enough evidence to harass a grieving family." James's jaw tightened. But grief wasn't what I saw in Claire Rodriguez's eyes. It was relief. When Sarah arrived an hour later, her pale complexion spoke of a sleepless night. Marcus introduced her to Detective Rodriguez, who immediately focused on her account. "Tell me about Claire that morning," James said, pen poised. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. She was different. Usually, she was so protective of Emma, always fussing over her appearance. But that day, she seemed almost eager to leave Emma with us. "How so?" She kept insisting Emma wear that specific jacket, even though it was too warm for the weather. And she was late picking Emma up from school the week before, which never happened. Claire was obsessively punctual. Marcus leaned forward. "What else struck you as odd?" "She knew details about our route that parents shouldn't know. When I mentioned we were taking the forest trail, she said, 'Oh, the one that leads to the old bridge.' But that information wasn't in the permission slips we sent home." Detective Rodriguez exchanged glances with Marcus. Someone had scouted the location. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "There's something else." The morning of the trip, Emma seemed scared. She kept asking if her daddy would be angry if something happened to her jacket. That was so unlike Emma. She was usually fearless. Did she say why she was worried? She said Claire had told her the jacket was very special, and that she had to keep it safe, no matter what happened. At the time, I thought Claire was just teaching her responsibility, but now, the three sat in heavy silence as the implications settled. Emma hadn't wandered off during an innocent field trip. She'd been marked for abduction by someone who knew exactly where she'd be and when. "We need to bring Claire Rodriguez in for questioning," James said grimly. Marcus nodded, but his expression was troubled. After 3 years, if she's guilty, she's had plenty of time to cover her tracks. And if there's a bigger conspiracy, He didn't need to finish the thought. They all understood that reopening this case meant painting targets on their backs. Somewhere out there, people had invested significant effort in making Emma Rodriguez disappear. They wouldn't appreciate anyone digging up the truth. But as Sarah looked at Emma's school photo on the case file, she knew they had no choice. That little girl deserved justice, no matter the cost. Against Marcus's advice, Sarah drove to the Rodriguez house that evening. The modest two-story home looked abandoned. Overgrown lawn, newspapers yellowing on the porch, curtains drawn tight against the world. David Rodriguez answered the door looking like a ghost of the man she remembered. His once neat appearance had dissolved into stubbled cheeks and bloodshot eyes that reeked of whiskey even at 7 p.m. "You," he slurred, gripping the doorframe. "The teacher. Why are you here?" "Mr. Rodriguez, I need to talk to you about Emma." His face crumpled. "Emma's gone. Everyone says so. Case closed." "David, someone brought Emma's jacket to a pawn shop yesterday. The jacket she was wearing when she disappeared." The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered backward, and Sarah caught the door before it could slam shut. "That's impossible," he whispered. Claire said they never found anything." "Claire lied to you, David. We think she knows what really happened to Emma." David collapsed into a torn recliner, his head in his hands. The living room was a disaster. Empty bottles, takeout containers, photos of Emma face down on every surface as if he couldn't bear to look at them. "I always wondered," he said finally. "Claire was so calm after Emma disappeared. Too calm. And my mother, Dolores. She kept saying it was God's will and we should accept and move on." Sarah knelt beside his chair. "What did you suspect?" "Claire had debts. Bad ones. Before we married, she was desperate for money. Then suddenly after Emma," his voice broke. "After Emma was gone, all her problems disappeared too. New car, new clothes, paid off her credit cards." "Why didn't you say anything to the police?" David's laugh was bitter. "Because I was a coward. Because I loved Claire and couldn't believe she'd hurt my baby girl. Because my own mother convinced me I was being paranoid and grief-stricken." The front door slammed open, making them both jump. Claire Rodriguez stood silhouetted in the doorway, her perfectly styled hair and designer clothes a stark contrast to David's deterioration. "What is she doing here?" Claire's voice was ice-cold as she stared at Sarah. "Claire, they found Emma's jacket," David said weakly. Something flickered across Claire's face. Fear, anger, calculation, before her expression hardened into rage. "You need to leave," she told Sarah. "Now." Sarah stood her ground. "Not until you tell us the truth about what happened to Emma." "The truth?" Claire stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "The truth is that little brat ruined everything. David was a mess after his first wife died, and Emma was a constant reminder of what he'd lost. I was trying to build a new life with him, but she was always in the way." "So you had her killed?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. Claire's smile was terrifying. "I had her removed, permanently, and if you don't stop digging into things that don't concern you, you might find yourself removed too." The threat hung in the air like poison. Claire turned to David, who was staring at her in horror. "Clean yourself up and forget this conversation ever happened, or you'll join your precious Emma wherever she ended up." As Claire stormed upstairs, Sarah realized they weren't just investigating a missing child case anymore. They were hunting a cold-blooded killer who had nothing left to lose. Sarah's hands shook as she called Marcus from her car outside the Rodriguez house. "She threatened me," she whispered into the phone. Claire practically admitted she had Emma killed. "Get out of there now," Marcus commanded. "Drive straight to the police station. Don't go home alone." But Marcus knew the police couldn't act on threats and partial confessions. After hanging up, he stared at his reflection in the pawn shop window. Margaret's voice echoed in his memory. "You can't save everyone, Marcus, but you can try to save the ones right in front of you." The next morning, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He called his nephew Tommy Chun, a detective with the county sheriff's department. "Uncle Marcus, you know I can't officially help with a closed case," Tommy said over coffee at their usual diner. "I'm not asking for official help. I'm asking you to look the other way while I do some digging." Tommy studied his uncle's determined expression. At 35, he'd inherited the Chun family's investigative instincts and knew better than to argue when Marcus had that look. "What do you need?" "Access to financial records, phone logs from 3 years ago, and maybe someone to watch my back." "This is dangerous, isn't it?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Claire Rodriguez just threatened Sarah Mitchell. If she's willing to kill a teacher who's asking questions, she won't hesitate to eliminate a retired investigator." That afternoon, Tommy's research confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Claire's bank records showed mysterious cash deposits totaling $30,000 in the weeks following Emma's disappearance. The deposits stopped as suddenly as they'd started. "There's more," Tommy said, spreading documents across Marcus's kitchen table. "I pulled the phone records from that time period. Claire made 17 calls to the same number on the day Emma disappeared. The number belongs to Tony Vasquez, the same Tony who brought me the jacket. Gets better. Vasquez has priors: fraud, assault, and one arrest for child endangerment that was mysteriously dropped." Marcus felt the familiar thrill of pieces clicking into place. Someone paid Claire to get rid of Emma, and she used Vasquez to do it. But who had that kind of money and motive? Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or join the girl." Tommy saw his uncle's expression change. "What is it?" Marcus showed him the message. "They know we're investigating. We need to bring you in for protection." "No." Marcus's voice was steel. "If we back down now, Emma's killer walks free forever. But we need to be smarter about this." That evening, as Marcus drove home from Tommy's apartment, he noticed headlights following him through 3 turns. When he pulled into his driveway, the dark sedan cruised slowly past, windows tinted black. Inside his house, Marcus double-checked the locks and loaded the .38 revolver he'd kept since his police days. Retirement had made him soft, but 30 years of investigations had taught him one crucial lesson. When predators felt cornered, they attacked. He called Sarah. "Pack a bag and stay with friends tonight. They know we're closing in." "Marcus, maybe we should." "No backing down," he interrupted. "Emma's counting on us. But from now on, we assume everyone's watching." As Marcus settled into his chair with the gun in his lap, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a carefully laid trap. Claire Rodriguez wasn't working alone. Someone with serious resources was pulling the strings. And that someone had just declared war. Tommy's deeper investigation into Claire's background revealed a web of deception that shocked even Marcus. Meeting in a secluded parking garage, Tommy spread out documents across the hood of his car. "Claire Rodriguez isn't who she claimed to be," Tommy began. "She told David she was a registered nurse with 5 years of hospital experience." Complete lie. Marcus studied the falsified documents. What was she really? A grifter. 3 arrests for insurance fraud in different states, 2 for identity theft. She was running from debt collectors when she met David at his wife's funeral. The callousness of it made Marcus's stomach turn. She targeted a grieving widower. Gets worse. I traced those phone calls between Claire and Tony Vasquez. They go back 6 months before Emma disappeared. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was planned. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later, looking exhausted but determined. She'd spent the night at her sister's house, jumping at every sound. "I've been thinking about that day," Sarah said without preamble. "There were things that didn't make sense then, but they do now." Marcus handed her a cup of coffee from his thermos. "Tell us." Claire knew our exact route through Pine Valley. She mentioned the old wooden bridge and asked if we'd be taking the forest path behind the visitor center. But that information wasn't in any of the materials we sent to parents. Tommy looked up from his notes. "Someone scouted the location." "More than that," Sarah continued. "Claire insisted Emma eat a packed lunch that morning instead of buying cafeteria food like usual. She said Emma had a sensitive stomach that day, but Emma never had stomach problems. Marcus felt his detective instincts sharpening. She drugged the lunch. It would explain why Emma seemed drowsy on the bus. I thought she was just tired from excitement. But looking back, she was unusually quiet and compliant. Tommy's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "We've got company." Black sedan, 2 occupants, circling the parking garage. They quickly gathered the documents and separated. As Sarah drove away, Marcus noticed the sedan following her. His blood ran cold. They weren't just being watched anymore. They were being hunted. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. David Rodriguez stood on his doorstep, sober for the first time in months but shaking with rage. "I confronted my mother about what you said," David announced, pushing past Marcus into the living room. "What did Dolores tell you?" She broke down crying. Said Claire came to her with the plan 6 months before Emma disappeared. "My mother hated Emma because she reminded her of my first wife, Linda." Marcus poured David a strong coffee. "What exactly did Dolores admit to?" "She gave Claire the money, $30,000 from my father's life insurance. Said Emma was ruining our family, and Claire could fix the problem permanently." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. This hadn't been Claire acting alone. It was a family conspiracy orchestrated by a grandmother who saw her granddaughter as an obstacle to her son's happiness. "David, we need you to wear a wire and get them to confess on record. They'll kill me if they find out. They'll kill all of us if we don't stop them first," Marcus replied grimly. "Emma deserves justice, and right now, you're the only one who can get close enough to get it." As David left to consider the proposal, Marcus realized they were running out of time. Someone was eliminating loose ends, and tomorrow might be too late to save Emma, if she was even still alive. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Marcus knew confronting Dolores Rodriguez directly was dangerous, but time was running out. The 72-year-old woman lived alone in a pristine house that felt more like a shrine to her late husband than a home. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to ask you about Emma," Marcus said when she reluctantly let him inside. Dolores's hands trembled as she poured tea with exaggerated precision. "Emma is with God now. We must accept his will. God didn't make Emma disappear. You did." The teacup shattered against the floor. Dolores aged 10 years in that moment, her carefully maintained composure cracking like old paint. "You don't understand," she whispered. "That child was destroying my son." Marcus activated the recording app on his phone. "Tell me how." David was finally healing from Linda's death. Claire was perfect for him. Beautiful, devoted, ready to give him the family he deserved. But Emma, her voice turned bitter. Emma looked exactly like Linda. Every day, David saw his dead wife in that child's face. He couldn't move forward. "So you decided Emma had to go?" Dolores's eyes blazed with self-righteous fury. "I offered Claire money to leave town and take Emma with her. A fresh start somewhere else. But Claire had a better solution." Marcus felt sick. "What solution?" "There are people who pay good money for pretty little girls. Claire knew someone who could arrange it quietly. Emma would disappear, David would grieve and heal, and Claire would stay to comfort him." The casual way she discussed trafficking her own granddaughter made Marcus's blood freeze. "You're talking about selling Emma into slavery." "I'm talking about saving my family," Dolores snapped. "That girl was a constant reminder of death and grief. I gave Claire the money to handle it properly." Marcus leaned forward. "Where is Emma now?" "I don't know." Claire handled the details. "She said it was better if I didn't know specifics." "You paid $30,000 to have your granddaughter kidnapped and sold." Dolores's composure finally shattered completely. "She wasn't my granddaughter. She was Linda's ghost haunting my son. I did what any mother would do to protect her child." The recording captured every word of her confession, but Marcus knew they needed more. Who else was involved? Claire handled everything through that man, Tony something. He knew people who could make arrangements discreetly. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "Get out now." Black sedan outside Dolores's house. But as Marcus stood to leave, Dolores grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "You can't tell David what I've done. It would destroy him. Your son deserves to know the truth about what happened to his daughter." "Emma wasn't his daughter," Dolores screamed. "She was Linda's spawn, and Linda is dead. David belongs with Claire now." Marcus pulled free and headed for the door, but froze when he saw 3 men in dark suits approaching the house. These weren't local thugs, they moved with military precision. He quickly texted Tommy, "Send backup to Dolores Rodriguez's house." Armed men approaching. But as the first man kicked in the front door, Marcus realized backup might not arrive in time. Someone had decided that loose ends needed to be permanently eliminated, and he was about to become one of them. The elderly woman who had orchestrated her granddaughter's disappearance was about to learn that evil has a way of consuming its own creators. The armed men froze when police sirens wailed in the distance. Tommy had received Marcus's message and dispatched units immediately. As the intruders retreated through the back door, Marcus helped a shaken Dolores to her feet. "Who were those men?" he demanded. "I don't know," she sobbed. Claire said there might be complications if anyone asked questions. 2 hours later, at the police station, Tommy had Claire Rodriguez in interrogation room 2. The recording of Dolores's confession had given them enough leverage to break her carefully constructed facade. "Your mother-in-law told us everything," Tommy lied smoothly. "About the money, the plan, Tony Vasquez. The only question now is whether you cooperate or go down for first-degree murder." Claire's perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists. "That old witch promised me she'd keep her mouth shut. So you admit to your involvement?" For 20 minutes, Claire maintained her innocence. But when Tommy played selected portions of Dolores's recorded confession, her resolve crumbled. "Fine," Claire exploded. "Yes, I did it. But it wasn't murder. It was business." Sarah, watching through the one-way mirror with Marcus, felt her legs give out. Hearing Claire casually discuss Emma's fate was worse than any nightmare. "Tell us exactly what happened," Tommy pressed. Claire's voice turned cold and calculating. "Dolores approached me 6 months after I married David. She said Emma was preventing David from truly accepting me as his wife. The child was always clinging to memories of her dead mother. So you agreed to kill her? Not kill, relocate. There's a difference." Claire's tone suggested she genuinely believed this distinction mattered. "Dolores offered me $50,000 to make Emma disappear permanently. I had debts, and David was too grief-stricken to be much of a husband." Marcus leaned forward. "How did you do it?" "I contacted Tony Vasquez. He knew people who specialized in quiet relocations. The plan was simple: drug Emma during the school trip, create a distraction, and have Tony's associate collect her during the confusion." "Vincent Shaw," Tommy said, consulting his notes. Claire nodded. Shaw was experienced. He guaranteed Emma would be placed with a family who wanted a daughter, far from here where she could never be traced. Sarah's heart shattered. "You sold her to strangers." "I gave her a chance at a new life with people who actually wanted her." Claire snapped. "David was too broken to be a proper father, and I wasn't going to spend my marriage competing with a ghost." Tommy's jaw tightened. "Where did Shaw take Emma?" "I don't know specifics. That was the arrangement, no details, no connections. Shaw said it was safer for everyone if I didn't know." "But you kept the jacket." Claire's mask of indifference finally slipped. "Shaw brought it back as proof the job was completed. I was supposed to destroy it, but it was evidence that Emma was really gone. That my life with David could finally begin." "Why sell it now?" "David started asking questions after you people began sniffing around. I needed to get rid of any evidence." Her voice turned venomous. "I should have burned it years ago." Marcus felt a mixture of triumph and horror. They had her confession, but Emma was still out there somewhere, assuming she was even alive after 3 years. "We need Vincent Shaw's location," Tommy demanded. "I don't have it. We only communicated through Tony, and only when necessary." As Claire was led back to her cell, Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. "Do you think Emma's still alive?" Marcus squeezed her hand. "If Shaw was running a trafficking operation, she might be. But after 3 years, he didn't finish the thought. They both knew that finding Emma now would be a miracle, but miracles were all they had left. 3 years earlier, the morning of Emma's disappearance had begun with Claire's meticulous preparation. She'd crushed 2 sleeping pills into Emma's favorite strawberry yogurt, watching the 9-year-old eat breakfast while chattering excitedly about the field trip. "Remember, sweetheart," Claire had said, adjusting Emma's pink jacket. "This jacket is very special. You must wear it all day, no matter what happens." Emma had nodded trustingly, unaware she was wearing the marker that would seal her fate. At Pine Valley Nature Center, Claire's careful timing had been perfect. She'd called in a fake emergency at her supposed workplace, giving herself an alibi while positioning herself near the forest trail. Vincent Shaw, a predator who specialized in making children disappear, waited in the shadows with practiced patience. The drugged yogurt had made Emma drowsy and compliant. When Sarah's group reached the wooden bridge, Emma had lagged behind, fighting the artificial fatigue that made her legs heavy and her thoughts fuzzy. "I don't feel good, Mrs. Mitchell," Emma had whispered, swaying slightly. Sarah, focused on managing 23 other children, had assumed Emma was overwhelmed by excitement. "Just sit here for a moment, sweetheart. We'll wait for you." That moment of separation was all Shaw needed. Approaching Emma with the gentle demeanor of a grandfather, he'd whispered, "Your stepmother sent me to help you. She's worried because you look sick." Emma, drugged and confused, had allowed Shaw to lead her away from the group. By the time Sarah realized Emma was missing, the child was already miles away, locked in the back of Shaw's van. Shaw had removed Emma's distinctive jacket immediately, knowing it would be described to police. The pink garment with its handmade unicorn patches became evidence of completion, proof for Claire that the job was done. For 3 days, Emma had been held in Shaw's remote cabin while he arranged the final transaction. The terrified child, slowly recovering from the drugs, had cried for her daddy and begged to go home. "Your daddy doesn't want you anymore," Shaw had told her with cruel efficiency. "Your new family is waiting for you. They'll love you better than he ever did." The lie had broken something fundamental in Emma's 9-year-old mind. If Daddy didn't want her, then maybe these strangers would be kinder. Meanwhile, Claire had played the grieving stepmother perfectly. She'd sobbed convincingly during police interviews, demanded expanded search efforts, and comforted David while secretly celebrating her success. Dolores had been equally convincing, playing the heartbroken grandmother while privately rejoicing that the obstacle to her son's happiness had been removed forever. The transaction had occurred on a rainy Thursday evening. Shaw had delivered Emma to a contact in the neighboring state, a man who specialized in providing custom families for wealthy clients who couldn't or wouldn't adopt through legal channels. Emma Rodriguez had vanished into a network that treated children like commodities, her identity scrubbed away as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. But Shaw had made one critical mistake. He'd kept the jacket as insurance, not knowing that 3 years later, financial desperation would force him to trust Tony Vasquez with disposing of evidence. Now, as Tommy coordinated with federal agents to track Shaw's current location, Marcus realized they were racing against time. Shaw knew the investigation was closing in, and men like him had contingency plans for eliminating loose ends. If Emma was still alive, Shaw would silence her before anyone could find her. The child who'd once trusted a stranger's gentle voice was running out of time. Again. Vincent Shaw's paranoia had served him well for 15 years of criminal activity, but the discovery of Emma's jacket had shattered his carefully constructed world. From his hideout in an abandoned warehouse outside the city, he monitored police scanners and news reports with growing panic. Claire's arrest had sealed his fate. She would talk, they always did when facing life sentences. Shaw had survived by always staying 3 steps ahead of law enforcement, but now he was cornered. His solution was typically brutal: eliminate all evidence, including the witnesses. Sarah was leaving the grocery store when Shaw's van pulled alongside her car. She recognized the predator's face from the police photos Tommy had shown her. Weathered features, cold eyes, and the practiced smile of someone who specialized in gaining children's trust. "Get in, teacher, or I start shooting strangers in this parking lot." Sarah's blood turned to ice, but she complied. Shaw's reputation for violence was well documented, and she wouldn't risk innocent lives. As they drove toward the warehouse district, Shaw spoke with chilling casualness. "You should have minded your own business. Emma Rodriguez was forgotten until you started digging. She was a child. Someone had to care." Shaw laughed bitterly. "That child was worth $50,000 to me. She served her purpose. Is she still alive? Does it matter? After 3 years with her new family, she doesn't even remember her real name." Meanwhile, Marcus was coordinating with Tommy when Sarah's sister called in panic. Sarah never came home from the store. Her car's still in the parking lot, but she's gone. Marcus felt his world tilt. Shaw had escalated from hiding evidence to taking hostages. "Check the security cameras. Now." The grainy footage showed Sarah being forced into Shaw's van. Marcus recognized the license plate from their database. Shaw was using his backup vehicle, which meant he was preparing to run. "He's not running," Marcus told Tommy grimly. "He's tying up loose ends. Sarah's his leverage to buy time. We'll find her." "Not fast enough." Marcus was already heading for his car. Shaw's not planning to negotiate. He's planning to eliminate everyone who can testify against him. Using his old investigative instincts, Marcus traced Shaw's likely route. The warehouse district offered perfect isolation for what Shaw intended. A place where screams wouldn't be heard. At the abandoned Maxwell Steel building, Marcus found Shaw's van. Through a broken window, he could see Sarah tied to a chair while Shaw paced frantically, talking on his phone. "I need extraction tonight," Shaw was saying. "The whole operation's blown. 3 witnesses need to be handled before I leave." Marcus realized Shaw wasn't working alone. He had backing from the larger trafficking network. They would kill Sarah, Marcus, and probably Tommy to protect their organization. Drawing his service revolver for the first time in 3 years, Marcus approached the building. He had one advantage. Shaw didn't know he was coming. But as Marcus reached the door, Shaw spotted him through the window. The predator's eyes blazed with desperate fury as he grabbed Sarah and pressed a knife to her throat. "Come in slowly, old man, or the teacher dies right now." Marcus had no choice but to comply. As he entered the warehouse, Shaw's smile was triumphant and terrifying. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, investigator, but you're going to help me fix it." Sarah's eyes met Marcus's, and he saw the same determination that had driven her to seek justice for Emma. They were trapped, but they weren't defeated. Yet, Shaw's knife pressed against Sarah's throat as Marcus slowly raised his hands. The warehouse felt like a tomb, cold, echoing, and filled with the smell of rust and decay. "You want to know about Emma Rodriguez?" Shaw snarled. "I'll tell you exactly what happened to your precious little girl." Marcus kept his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We know you took her." "Took her? I saved her from a family that didn't want her." Shaw's laugh was bitter and unhinged. "That grandmother paid good money to get rid of the brat, and the stepmother was practically dancing when I confirmed the job was done. Where is Emma now?" Shaw's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. "Emma Rodriguez doesn't exist anymore. She was sold to the Hendersons in Colorado. Nice family. Wanted a daughter but couldn't have children. They paid $100,000 for a pretty blonde girl with no questions asked." Sarah's gasp was audible even through her restraints. "She's alive. Oh, she's alive. Living as Anna Henderson for 3 years now. Private tutoring, nice clothes, loving parents who think they rescued an orphan from overseas adoption." Shaw's voice turned cruel. "She doesn't remember David Rodriguez or her dead mother or her precious teacher. The trauma therapy saw to that." Marcus felt hope and horror battling in his chest. The network erased her memory? Child psychology is amazing. A few months of therapeutic intervention and traumatic memories can be adjusted. Emma Rodriguez died in that van 3 years ago. Anna Henderson was born from her ashes. The confirmation that Emma was alive but psychologically destroyed was almost worse than believing she was dead. Shaw had stolen not just her freedom, but her very identity. "You're going to let us go," Marcus said firmly. "This is over." Shaw's laugh was genuinely amused. "Over? This is just beginning. The Henderson adoption was just one transaction. There are dozens of families across the country with adopted children they acquired through our services. Rich people who want perfect kids without messy legal procedures. Sarah's voice cracked. How many children? Enough to make me very wealthy, and enough to make sure I never get caught. Too many important people would be implicated if this network was exposed. The sound of approaching sirens made Shaw's expression turn deadly. Tommy had tracked them down, but Marcus realized their rescue might trigger a massacre. You called them, Shaw accused, raising the knife higher. I came alone, Marcus protested. But they'll find us eventually. Shaw's phone buzzed. He answered without taking his eyes off his captives. What? How many units? Damn it! Marcus caught fragments of the conversation: federal agents, warrants, coordinated raids across multiple states. The entire trafficking network was being rolled up simultaneously. Shaw ended the call and stared at Marcus with pure hatred. Congratulations, old man. You've destroyed $1 million operation. Good. But you won't live to see the trials. Shaw raised the knife above Sarah's heart. Neither will the teacher. In that moment, Marcus made a decision that would haunt him forever. He lunged forward, grabbing Shaw's wrist just as the blade descended. The two men crashed into a stack of rusted metal, Shaw's knife spinning away into the darkness. The fight was brutal and desperate. Shaw was younger and stronger, but Marcus had 30 years of street experience. They rolled across the concrete floor, trading blows that echoed through the empty warehouse. Shaw managed to reach a second knife hidden in his boot. As he raised it to strike, Marcus grabbed a piece of rebar and swung with all his remaining strength. The impact was final and decisive. As Shaw collapsed, Marcus crawled to Sarah and cut her restraints with shaking hands. She was bruised but alive, tears streaming down her face. Emma's alive, she whispered. After all this time, she's alive. Marcus nodded, but his expression remained grim. Finding Emma would be the easy part. Bringing her home to a life she no longer remembered would be the real challenge. The federal raids across 5 states had been swift and devastating. Within 48 hours of Shaw's death, the entire trafficking network lay in ruins. But for the families involved, the real reckoning was just beginning. In the county jail, Claire Rodriguez sat in her cell staring at concrete walls, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd unleashed. When Detective Tommy Chun arrived for her final interrogation, she looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. The federal agents tell me Shaw's network handled over 60 children in the past decade, Tommy said, settling across from her. 60 families destroyed because people like you were willing to sell kids for money. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I thought Emma would be happy with a new family. I never meant for her to be hurt. You drugged a 9-year-old girl and handed her to a stranger. What did you think would happen? For the first time, Claire's carefully constructed justifications crumbled. I was desperate. My debts, my past. Everything was falling apart. When Dolores offered me that money, it seemed like the answer to everything. Tommy leaned forward. Tell me about the Hendersons in Colorado. What do you know about them? Nothing. Shaw never told me details. He said it was safer that way. I just assumed they were a normal family who wanted a daughter. They paid $100,000 for Emma. Normal families don't have that kind of cash for illegal adoptions. Claire's composure finally shattered completely. Oh God, what have I done? I told myself Emma would be better off, but I was just lying to make myself feel better about the money. Down the hall, Dolores Rodriguez faced her own reckoning. At 72, the woman who had orchestrated her granddaughter's disappearance sat rocking back and forth in her cell, muttering prayers that felt hollow even to her own ears. When Sarah and Marcus visited her with federal agents, Dolores initially tried to maintain her righteous indignation. I did what any mother would do to protect her son, she insisted. Emma was destroying David's chance at happiness. Sarah's voice was ice cold. You sold your granddaughter to child traffickers. I gave her a chance at a better life. David was broken after Linda died. He couldn't be a proper father to Emma. She needed parents who could love her without being reminded of death every time they looked at her. Marcus studied the elderly woman's face. Did you know what Shaw's network really did to these children? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Dolores's eyes. They found good homes for unwanted children, families who could provide better lives. They erased Emma's memory, Dolores. She doesn't remember David, or her mother, or her own name. They psychologically destroyed a child to make her compliant for her new owners. The revelation hit Dolores like a physical blow. That's not what Claire promised. She said Emma would just live with a new family. Claire lied to you the same way you lied to yourself, Sarah said. You wanted Emma gone, and you didn't care how it happened as long as your hands looked clean. Meanwhile, David Rodriguez sat in his therapist's office, sober for 2 months but struggling with guilt that threatened to destroy what remained of his sanity. I should have protected her, he repeated for the 100th time. I should have seen what Claire and my mother were planning. Dr. Matthews handed him another tissue. You were grieving, David. Grief makes people vulnerable to manipulation. But Emma trusted me to keep her safe. She was my responsibility, and I failed her. You were also a victim of this conspiracy. Claire and your mother specifically targeted your vulnerability to execute their plan. David looked up with haunted eyes. The federal agents say they found her. Emma's alive, but she doesn't remember me. How do I face a daughter who doesn't know I exist? One day at a time, Dr. Matthews said gently. Emma needs time to heal, and so do you. The most important thing now is that she's safe. But safety was relative. In Colorado, the Hendersons had learned that their adopted daughter was actually a kidnapped child, and their perfect family was built on a foundation of lies and blood money. Marcus lay in the intensive care unit, his body bearing the brutal evidence of his fight with Vincent Shaw. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and internal bleeding had left him fighting for his life, but his mind remained sharp as ever. Sarah maintained a constant vigil beside his hospital bed, alternating between reading case files and watching the steady rhythm of his heart monitor. The weight of everything they'd discovered pressed down on her like a physical burden. You saved her, Sarah whispered to Marcus's unconscious form. After 3 years, you brought Emma back to us. But even as she spoke the words, Sarah knew the real work was just beginning. Emma, now Anna Henderson, was alive, but recovering her would be more complex than any of them had imagined. Tommy entered the room carrying coffee and federal case updates. The Hendersons are cooperating fully, he reported quietly. They genuinely believed they were adopting an orphan through a legitimate private agency. They're devastated to learn the truth. What about Emma? She's confused and scared. She's been Anna Henderson for 3 years. It's the only identity she remembers. The trauma counselors say forcing her to remember too quickly could cause permanent psychological damage. Sarah's heart ached for the child caught between 2 identities. Does she remember anything about her life before? Fragments. She has nightmares about a woman in a pink jacket, that's you, from the day she disappeared. But she can't place the memory in context. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the federal child psychologist assigned to Emma's case, had painted a sobering picture of the recovery process. The sophisticated psychological conditioning Emma had undergone wasn't easily reversed. The traffickers used advanced techniques, Dr. Walsh had explained. They didn't just hide Emma's memories. They replaced them with a complete alternative history. Anna Henderson has 3 years of artificial memories that feel completely real to her. Marcus stirred in his hospital bed, his eyes fluttering open. Sarah immediately leaned forward, relief flooding her face. Welcome back, she said softly. Marcus's voice was hoarse but determined. Emma, she's safe. The federal agents have her in protective custody in Colorado while they sort out the legal complexities. The Hendersons? Tommy answered. They're being investigated for their role, but it appears they were victims too. They paid the money believing they were helping an orphan, not buying a kidnapped child. Marcus struggled to sit up despite his injuries. She needs to see familiar faces, people who remember who she really is. The doctors say she's not ready. The psychological trauma runs too deep. Then we wait, Marcus said firmly. However long it takes. Over the next several days, as Marcus slowly recovered, the full scope of the trafficking network became clear. Shaw's organization had operated across multiple states, selling children to wealthy families who either didn't know or didn't care about the illegal origins of their adoptions. But Emma's case had cracked the entire system open. Federal agents were working with child psychologists to identify and recover dozens of other victims, many of whom, like Emma, had no memory of their original identities. Sarah found herself thinking constantly about the little girl who had trusted her to keep her safe on that field trip 3 years ago. Emma had been so excited about seeing deer and collecting rocks, chattering endlessly about the adventure ahead. Now that same child was trapped between two worlds, the life stolen from her and the false memories implanted to replace it. "She's going to need all of us," Sarah told Marcus as his strength slowly returned. "David, me. Everyone who remembers who Emma Rodriguez really was." Marcus nodded, his investigator's mind already working on the challenge ahead. "The hardest part isn't finding missing children," he said quietly. "It's helping them find themselves again." As if summoned by their conversation, David Rodriguez appeared in the hospital doorway. Sober for 3 months now, he looked healthier than he had in years, but his eyes held the haunted expression of a father preparing to meet a daughter who wouldn't recognize him. "Is it time?" he asked simply. "Soon," Sarah promised. "Very soon." The federal task force's coordinated raids had yielded results beyond their wildest hopes. Over the past month, 17 children had been recovered from families who had unknowingly participated in Shaw's trafficking network. But none of the cases had been as complex as Emma Rodriguez. Marcus, now walking with a cane but determined to see this through, joined Sarah and Tommy at the Denver field office. Federal agent Lisa Morrison briefed them on the delicate situation they were about to enter. "Anna Henderson, Emma, is staying at a secure facility while we work through the legal and psychological complexities," Agent Morrison explained. "The Hendersons have been cleared of criminal wrongdoing, but they're devastated. They genuinely loved the child they knew as Anna." Sarah's heart ached for everyone involved. How is she handling the truth? She's confused and frightened. 3 years of memories as Anna Henderson feel completely real to her. Learning that her entire identity was constructed is traumatic beyond measure. Dr. Walsh, the child psychologist, joined them with cautious optimism. "We've had a breakthrough. Emma has been having recurring dreams about a woman in a pink jacket calling her name. The dreams are fragmented, but they're clearly memories trying to surface." Marcus leaned forward despite his injuries. "Sarah was wearing a pink jacket the day Emma disappeared. That's why we think Emma might be ready to see you, Miss Mitchell. But we need to proceed very carefully. Forcing memories can be as traumatic as suppressing them." The secure facility looked more like a comfortable home than a government building. Emma, still calling herself Anna, sat in a sunny playroom working on a puzzle. At 12 years old, she had grown taller and more mature, but Sarah recognized her immediately. Those same bright eyes, the same concentrated expression when focusing on a task. Emma was still there beneath the surface. "Anna," Dr. Walsh said gently, "I'd like you to meet someone who knew you when you were younger." Emma looked up, and for a moment, Sarah saw a flicker of recognition cross her face. Then confusion returned. "I don't remember her," Emma said quietly. Sarah knelt to Emma's level, fighting back tears. "That's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes our minds protect us by hiding memories that are too scary to remember. Are you the lady from my dreams? The one in the pink jacket?" Sarah's breath caught. "I might be. What do you remember about the dreams?" "There's a bridge and lots of other kids. You're calling my name, but..." Emma frowned. "But in the dreams, you call me something different. Not Anna. What name do you hear?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Emma. You call me Emma." The breakthrough was electric. Sarah reached out slowly, letting Emma decide whether to accept the contact. After a moment's hesitation, Emma took Sarah's hand. "I think I remember you," Emma said, tears forming in her eyes. "You were my teacher, weren't you?" "Yes, I was. And you were my student. A very special student who loved unicorns and asked the best questions about everything." Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile they'd seen. "I still love unicorns. Anna loves unicorns too." Dr. Walsh made notes, recognizing the significance of Emma integrating her two identities rather than rejecting one completely. Over the next several sessions, more memories began surfacing. Emma remembered her father David, though she still felt more connected to the Hendersons who had raised her for the past 3 years. She remembered her love of art, her fear of thunderstorms, and her favorite bedtime story. But most importantly, she remembered that her real name was Emma Rodriguez, and that people who loved her had been searching for her all this time. The Hendersons, devastated but committed to Emma's well-being, agreed to a gradual transition. They would remain part of her life while she reconnected with her biological family. "Family isn't just about blood," Mrs. Henderson had told David through tears. "Emma needs all of us now." As Emma slowly began to reclaim her identity, Sarah knew they had achieved something miraculous. The little girl who had disappeared 3 years ago was finally coming home. Not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. The healing process would take time, but for the first time since that terrible day at Pine Valley, Sarah allowed herself to believe that everything would be okay. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the National Center for Missing Children, where Sarah Mitchell now worked as a coordinator for recovery cases. Her office walls were covered with photos of found children, faces that had been lost but were now home. Emma's picture held the place of honor on her desk. Not the missing child poster that had haunted her dreams, but a recent photo of a 13-year-old girl with bright eyes and a genuine smile. The integration process had been challenging but successful. Emma Rodriguez Henderson, she had chosen to keep both names, lived primarily with her father David, but spent weekends with the Hendersons, who remained an important part of her chosen family. Marcus entered the office using his walking cane, his recovery nearly complete but leaving him with permanent reminders of that night in the warehouse. At 65, he had officially retired from investigative work, but spent his time training federal agents in trafficking case techniques. "How's our girl?" he asked, settling into the chair across from Sarah's desk. "Thriving. She starts high school next month, and she's already talking about studying criminal justice." Sarah smiled warmly. "She wants to help find other missing children. She's got the heart for it, and the experience to understand what families go through." David Rodriguez had transformed as dramatically as his daughter. 18 months sober, he worked as a counselor for other parents of missing children. The guilt would never fully leave him, but he had channeled it into helping others navigate the nightmare he had survived. "The Hendersons are good people," David had told Sarah recently. "They loved Emma when she needed love most. I can't resent them for that." The legal aftermath had been swift and decisive. Claire Rodriguez received 25 years for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and child trafficking. Her carefully constructed facade of respectability had crumbled completely during the trial. Dolores Rodriguez, now 75, had been sentenced to life in prison. The grandmother who had orchestrated her granddaughter's disappearance spent her days in a cell, finally understanding the true cost of her jealousy and manipulation. Tony Vasquez, the middleman who had sold Emma's jacket, received 15 years after cooperating with federal investigators to identify other victims of Shaw's network. But the most important outcome was sitting in Dr. Walsh's office that very morning, participating in her final therapy session. "How do you feel about Emma Rodriguez and Anna Henderson now?" Dr. Walsh asked gently. Emma, now comfortable with her dual identity, smiled thoughtfully. "They're both me. Anna taught me how to be strong when I was scared. Emma reminds me where I came from and who loves me. I need both of them to be whole." The psychological integration had been remarkable. Instead of rejecting one identity for the other, Emma had woven them together into a stronger, more resilient sense of self. "I remember the day I disappeared now," Emma continued. "I remember being scared and confused, but I also remember the people who never stopped looking for me." That afternoon, Emma met Sarah at their favorite coffee shop, a monthly tradition they had maintained since Emma's recovery. "Mrs. Mitchell," Emma said, using the title she had never stopped using despite Sarah's gentle corrections, "I want to show you something." Emma pulled out a worn pink jacket. Not the original, which remained evidence in a federal case file, but an identical replacement she had asked David to buy for her. "I had Mom Henderson sew new unicorn patches on it," Emma explained. "Each patch represents someone who helped bring me home. This silver one is you, because you never gave up on me." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Emma continued pointing out patches. Gold for Marcus, blue for Tommy, green for David, purple for the Hendersons, and dozens of others representing federal agents, counselors, and volunteers who had worked on her case. "And this one," Emma said, pointing to a rainbow patch in the center, "represents all the other children still missing. Someday, I want to help find them too." As they walked through the park where Emma had once played as a carefree 9-year-old, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The little girl who had disappeared during a school field trip had returned as a young woman with the wisdom and compassion to help others facing similar traumas. "You know what the most amazing thing is?" Emma said as they sat on a bench overlooking the playground. "What's that, sweetheart?" "I used to have nightmares about the day I was taken. But now when I dream about it, I remember that even in the darkest moment, people were already looking for me. I was never really alone." Sarah squeezed Emma's hand, knowing that the scared teacher who had lost a student had found something far more precious than redemption. She had found purpose, family, and the unshakable knowledge that love never gives up. Emma Rodriguez Henderson was home, and she was whole.